The real estate closing took 3 hours. My parents sat across from me at the conference table, bewildered by the stacks of paperwork, while my attorney explained each document with practiced patience. This establishes the family trust, Margaret said, pointing to a particularly dense paragraph. The property is held in trust with your parents as primary beneficiaries. They have the exclusive right to occupy and use the property for their lifetimes. However, legal ownership remains with the trust, which your daughter controls as trustee. Dad squinted at the legal language. So we can live there, but we don't own it? You own the right to live there, Margaret clarified. Forever, with no rent, no mortgage, no property taxes. Those are all handled by the trust. But the actual deed stays in the trust's name, which protects the property from creditors, liens, or anyone trying to claim it from you. Mom looked at me with tears in her eyes. This is too much. $900,000. We can't accept this. You already worked 40 years at jobs you hated to raise me and pay for my education, I said quietly. This is me saying thank you. You deserve to retire somewhere beautiful. The villa was in a gated retirement community in Arizona, desert views, mountain sunsets, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a small garden, and a community pool. Everything they'd ever mentioned wanting in their retirement dreams during my childhood. I'd made my money in software development, selling the cybersecurity company I'd built from my apartment to a major tech firm for $38 million when I was 32. After taxes and paying off investors, I'd walked away with enough to never work again if I was careful. I chose to keep working, consulting and investing because I liked the challenge. But I also chose to take care of the people who'd taken care of me. My sister Vanessa had a different approach to family obligation. She called twice during the closing, both times asking when I'd be wiring her share of the gift money. I declined both calls. Vanessa was 5 years older than me, married to a perpetually unemployed man named Kyle, with 3 kids under 10. She'd spent her 20s bouncing between retail jobs and her 30s bouncing between multi-level marketing schemes that never quite delivered the promised income. She viewed my success as a family asset that should be distributed equally, despite having contributed nothing to its creation. The housewarming party was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after my parents moved in. I'd hired caterers, invited their friends from their old neighborhood, and arranged for a small band. My parents deserved a celebration. I flew in Friday night and stayed at a hotel near their community. When I arrived at the villa Saturday morning to help set up, something felt wrong immediately. There were children's bikes on the front porch. Toys were scattered across the small garden my mother had been excitedly planning. A minivan sat in the driveway that wasn't my parents' car. I used my key to open the front door. The living room had been transformed. My parents' carefully arranged furniture was shoved against the walls. Air mattresses covered the floor. Children's clothing was piled on every surface. The kitchen was a disaster. Dishes stacked in the sink, food left out on the counters, the refrigerator door hanging open. I found my parents in the smaller bedroom, the one that was supposed to be the guest room. They'd been moved out of the master bedroom. Dad was sitting on the edge of a bare mattress, looking defeated. Mom was folding clothes with shaking hands, tears running down her face. What happened? I asked, though I already knew. Vanessa showed up Wednesday, Dad said quietly. Said Kyle lost another job. Said they were getting evicted. Said they just needed to stay for a few days until they figured things out. And you let them? She's our daughter, Mom said, her voice breaking. What were we supposed to do? Let our grandchildren be homeless? I walked through the rest of the house. Vanessa and Kyle had taken over the master bedroom, their belongings spread across every surface. The children had claimed the second bathroom entirely, their toys floating in the bathtub. The garage was full of boxes and furniture, apparently everything from their apartment. Vanessa emerged from the master bedroom in pajamas at 11 in the morning, looking annoyed at being woken up. Oh, you're here. Good. We need to talk about increasing the food budget. 3 kids eat a lot, and Mom keeps buying the cheap stuff. Get out, I said calmly. She laughed. Excuse me? Pack your things and leave. This house is for Mom and Dad's retirement, not for you to move your family into. This is a family house, Vanessa said, her voice rising. Mom and Dad have way more space than they need. They can share with family. That's what family does. They're not sharing. You're taking over. They're sleeping in the guest room. Because the master has better closet space for our family's stuff. They don't need that much room. They're old. They don't have anything. Kyle appeared behind her, scratching his stomach through a stained t-shirt. What's going on? My sister thinks she can kick us out, Vanessa said, like she owns the place. I do own the place, I said quietly. It's held in a family trust that I control. Mom and Dad have lifetime occupancy rights. You have no rights to this property whatsoever. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You gave this house to them. It's their house. They can let us stay if they want. Actually, they can't. The trust documents specify that only the named beneficiaries can occupy the property. Anyone else constitutes a violation of the trust terms and can result in removal by legal means. This was absolutely true. Margaret had written the trust carefully, specifically to prevent situations like this. I'd seen my sister's patterns for years. I knew she'd try something eventually. You can't just throw us out, Kyle said. We have kids. You make your nieces and nephew homeless? You made yourselves homeless by getting evicted from your apartment. That's not my responsibility, or my parents' responsibility. We're family, Vanessa insisted. This is what you do for family, or are you too rich now to care about anyone else? I looked past them to where my parents stood in the hallway, Dad's hand on Mom's shoulder. They looked exhausted and scared, afraid to upset anyone, caught between their children. Mom, Dad, do you want Vanessa living here? I asked directly. They were silent. The answer was obvious, but they couldn't say it out loud. Get your stuff and leave, old people, Vanessa announced, turning to our parents with sudden venom. If my sister wants to be cruel, then fine. This house should go to the family members who actually need it. You two can go back to your old apartment. You don't need all this space anyway. Mom's face crumpled. Dad's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Start packing, Vanessa continued. We're staying, you're leaving. That's how this is going to work. And incredibly, Dad started moving toward the bedroom. Decades of avoiding conflict, of keeping the peace, of accommodating his difficult older daughter, had trained him to comply even with something this outrageous. Dad, stop, I said. You're not going anywhere. But he kept moving, pulling a suitcase from the closet with trembling hands. I stepped out onto the front porch and made 2 phone calls. The first was to Margaret, my attorney. I need you at the Arizona property immediately. Yes, today. Bring whatever you need for an emergency trust violation and trespassing situation. The second was to the non-emergency police line. I need to report a trespassing situation at a property I own. The individuals were asked to leave and refused. They're also currently threatening and coercing elderly residents. Yes, I can wait for officers to arrive. Margaret arrived first, pulling up in a rental car 45 minutes later with her paralegal assistant. She was a 60-year-old woman who'd built her career on estate law and protecting vulnerable clients. She dealt with family property disputes for decades. Nothing surprised her anymore. Show me the situation, she said crisply. I walked her through the house. She photographed everything with her phone, the displacement of my parents, the takeover of the master bedroom, the children's belongings everywhere. She interviewed my parents quietly, documenting their statements about being threatened and told to leave. When the police arrived, 2 officers in their late 30s, Margaret met them at the door with printed copies of the trust documents, the deed, and her bar credentials. I'm the attorney who created this family trust, she explained. The property is held in trust for the benefit of these 2 individuals. She gestured to my parents. These other individuals, she said, pointing toward Vanessa's family, have no legal right to occupy the property. They've been asked to leave and refused. They've also threatened the legal occupants, constituting both trespassing and potential elder abuse. The officers reviewed the documents. One of them, an older man with sergeant stripes, looked up at Vanessa. Ma'am, is this your property? It's my parents' property, Vanessa said. Actually, it's held in trust, the sergeant said. Your parents have occupancy rights. You don't. The trustee, your sister, is asking you to leave. That's a legal eviction notice. You need to vacate the property. We have kids, Vanessa protested. You can't throw kids out on the street. You have 2 hours to gather your belongings and leave, the sergeant said. If you're not gone by then, you'll be charged with criminal trespassing. If you need help finding emergency housing, I can provide resources for families in crisis. Kyle finally spoke up. This is ridiculous. We're family. This is property law, the sergeant said. Family doesn't override legal ownership. You're trespassing. Leave voluntarily or be arrested. Your choice. Margaret turned to me. I've documented everything for a potential restraining order if needed. The trust violation is clear. Do you want to pursue harassment charges for the threats made to your parents? I looked at my parents. Dad had stopped packing. Mom was sitting on the bed, looking shell-shocked. Not unless they refuse to leave, I said. I just want them gone. It took 90 minutes for Vanessa's family to pack. They filled the minivan in Kyle's truck, making 3 trips to a storage facility. Vanessa didn't speak to me or our parents. She slammed doors, threw things into boxes, and made sure everyone could hear her phone calls about how she was being illegally evicted by her cruel sister. The officers waited through all of it, standing in the driveway to ensure my parents weren't threatened further. When they finally drove away, the sergeant handed me his card. If they come back, call immediately. Given the documented threats to your parents, you have grounds for a restraining order. I'd recommend pursuing it. Margaret nodded in agreement. I'll start the paperwork Monday. We'll also send a formal cease and desist letter to make it crystal clear that any further contact or attempted access to this property will result in legal action. After they all left, I spent 2 hours with my parents cleaning the house. We threw away the food Vanessa had left rotting. We stripped the beds and started laundry. We moved my parents' belongings back into the master bedroom where they belonged. Dad didn't say much, just worked methodically, putting his house back in order. Mom cried quietly while folding sheets. I'm sorry, she said eventually. We should have called you immediately. We should have stood up to her. She's manipulative, I said gently. She knows exactly how to make you feel guilty. That's not your fault. She's going to hate us now, Mom said. She's going to keep the grandkids away. She's been using the grandkids as leverage for years, I said. Making you feel like you have to earn access to them by giving her money or doing what she wants. That's not a healthy relationship. Dad sat down heavily on the couch. I worked 43 years. Your mother worked 38. We never made much money, but we did our best. We raised 2 daughters, one who worked hard and succeeded, and one who thinks the world owes her something. You did everything right, I said firmly. Vanessa's choices are her own. Her problems are her own. You didn't fail her. She failed herself. The housewarming party happened that evening, smaller than planned because I'd sent last-minute apologies to some guests, but meaningful nonetheless. My parents' old neighbors came. They admired the house, the garden, the mountain views. They toasted my parents' retirement and their well-deserved rest. Nobody mentioned Vanessa. My parents told people their daughter couldn't make it. I didn't correct them. Margaret pulled me aside before leaving. The restraining order will be filed Tuesday. I'm adding a clause to the trust that specifically names your sister as prohibited from the property. If your parents die, the property reverts to you entirely. Won't she contest it? Let her try. The trust is ironclad. The documentation from today proves why the restriction is necessary. Any judge will uphold it. I stayed in Arizona for 3 more days, making sure my parents settled back in, that they felt safe, that they understood the legal protections in place. I installed a security system with cameras at all entry points. I changed the locks and didn't give Vanessa a key. On my last morning there, Mom made breakfast while Dad read the newspaper on their patio. They looked peaceful. Older, tired from the stress, but peaceful. Thank you, Dad said when I came out with my coffee. For everything. The house. The protection. For standing up when we couldn't. That's what family does, I said. Real family, not the version Vanessa sells where everyone sacrifices for her benefit. I flew home that afternoon. Vanessa sent me a long text message that evening, full of accusations, guilt trips, and threats. I forwarded it to Margaret and blocked Vanessa's number. The restraining order was granted 2 weeks later. Vanessa was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of my parents' property. She filed a complaint with the court, claiming the trust was invalid. The judge reviewed the documents and dismissed her complaint within 48 hours. My parents live peacefully in their retirement villa now. They've made friends in the community. Mom joined a garden club. Dad plays poker with other retired guys twice a week. They video call me every Sunday to show me what's new in their lives. They never mention Vanessa. I don't ask. I paid $900,000 for that villa and tens of thousands more in legal fees to protect it. Some people would say that's too much, that I should have found a compromise, that I destroyed my relationship with my sister over property. But I didn't destroy anything. I just refused to let my sister destroy what I built for our parents. I refused to let her manipulate and threaten people who'd spent their whole lives working hard and deserving better. The money wasn't the point. The villa wasn't the point. The point was that some people spend their lives taking care of others, and they deserve to be protected when takers come for what little peace they've earned. My parents earned their peace. I just make sure they got to keep it.